Welcome to Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies with your host, John Sleeting, an executive partner for Clearwater Capital Partners. Join John and his guests on this exclusive journey behind the scenes of extraordinary entrepreneurial families. In this series, we will dive deep into the stories of John's guests, who generously unveil the paths they've walked, the challenges they've overcome, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Throughout these conversations, we explore their achievements beyond mere recognition, disclosing the distinctive perspectives that have shaped their entrepreneurial journeys. We hope you enjoy.
Happy New Year. Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm your host, John Sleeting, and today I'm joined by Katie Berganske-Frank. Happy New Year to all our listeners, and we're going to take a little bit of a different approach as you're preparing for your 2025 and thinking through priorities, the future, how you set your agenda for the new year. And to do that, we need to look back. So before I introduce Katie, I'm going to share a little bit of how this episode's going to work, and then we'll get to know Katie a little bit, and then we're going to do our review, because it's going to be a review of the first 25. This is actually number 25, episode number 25 of this series. And we're going to take a look back, because sometimes to look forward, to set your priorities, you need to look back and what are the lessons learned? Where do the inspirations come from? How do you set priorities? What is it that you want to accomplish in your lives as you move forward? How do you build the legacy? Well, the legacy we've talked often about is about the daily activities of living your life, but doing it with intentionality. And we believe that there's so much that we've learned individually, collectively, listeners have shared from the guests that we've had on this podcast, that we're going to go through and do a little bit of a highlight of these first 25 episodes. We're going to share some of the clips. We're going to talk a little bit about them, because Katie's been involved from day one, from the conceptual, the ideation that took place to create this podcast, the production, the editing, the reviews, the engaging of our guests before and after. And there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. So we thought it would be perfect to have Katie join me in this conversation to review these first 25 episodes. Katie is so accomplished in her own right. You've probably heard her name from Clearwater Capital. She's our Chief Revenue Officer. What does that mean? That means that she's in charge of brand and communications, marketing broadly, service offerings, how we approach what we do, and the engagement, the client experience in its totality, and how thoughtful we need to be and how we engage the families that we serve. So Katie's involved with every aspect of our business. She sits on the operating committee at Clearwater Capital. And her background includes human capital and technology, as she joined Clearwater going on 4 years ago now. She brings a great breadth of business perspective, which has also been recognized in the community. She, in 2018, was the Leader of the Year, and in 2022, the Woman of the Year in Business for the Chicagoland Suburban Business Awards, awarded by the Daily Herald. Very well accomplished and recognized. She's a great talent. She's a great asset to our firm, but more importantly, a great asset to the families that we serve. So I'm delighted to have Katie join me today as we start off this conversation. So Katie, I shared a little bit of your background, but for listeners to get to know you even more, share a little bit of your story and what brings you here today.
So, John, thank you for such a kind introduction. This is going to be a really fun episode to do with you. I'm excited to go through all the amazing guests that have appeared on the show and that you've had such beautiful conversations with. I think before I get into sharing a little bit more about my journey, it's a really great opportunity to frankly thank those guests for coming onto the show, for sharing those stories, for being vulnerable. I think you could probably find hundreds and hundreds of podcasts talking about entrepreneurial success that almost makes it feel like it's a straight line, right? That people just go straight to that successful piece. And our guests are so authentic. They're so raw. They're so vulnerable. They're sharing the challenges, the hardships, the tenacity that they've had to have to really get themselves where they are today, to sit in this chair and have these beautiful conversations. So thank you so much to our guests and for you for bringing them in such a thoughtful way. I think there's another thing that I want to impress upon listeners, especially those who are newer to Entrepreneurial Legacies, and that is, how can they align themselves to hear more of these episodes? Hopefully, especially after this, they're really jazzed to be like, I need to listen to this one and this one and this one. So in my mind, there are three pathways. If they're listening right now, then they're either on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube and tuning in that way, which is wonderful. But there are some other platforms where they can get alerts or be tied in even deeper to Clearwater Capital Partners, the firm we represent. One being the LinkedIn newsletter. So just a couple months ago, 3 months ago now, we rolled out this amazing idea from one of our colleagues, this LinkedIn newsletter. So for those professionals that do go onto LinkedIn and utilize that as a tool for connecting, what a great opportunity. Go to Clearwater Capital Partners and find our profile, subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll get an alert whenever you're in there and an email sent to you as well. And frankly, let's face it, while they're there, definitely like our page so that they can follow along with all the activities happening with Clearwater. The other path that we don't widely talk about, John, is our thought leadership. Thought leadership is our communication to our clients and our relationships, not just about the happenings, but our private client letter is in there, where John Chapman, we're going to talk about him in just a minute, speaks to the client about what's going on in the world and how we're navigating these intricacies so that they feel the confidence that we've got this, like we're taking care of them in really big ways. And then we also have other timely content. We have Entrepreneurial Legacies in there. We have news. We have events. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, too. So the way that listeners can align to Clearwater Capital Partners is by going to ccpwealth.com. They can scroll down to the bottom and subscribe accordingly. And
so I think the listeners are already getting the sense that this all happens because of your team in terms of this podcast, but really getting inside the how we operate as a team and how critical you are regarding how all these avenues are out there for people to get connected. I know at the end of every episode, I also put out there, send us an email at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com for follow-up. Why? Because we're building the firm and these communications to serve people. We're not doing it for the sake of coming in and doing a podcast, but for the sake of these families, these individuals have inspired us. They've encouraged us. We want to get the stories out there. And if individuals want to hear particular stories or topics, taking maybe even some of the content from today and come back saying, it would really be helpful if we heard about X, Y, or Z within the wealth space, then communicate with us, right? And we'll go explore and find those particular cases too.
Even beyond that, if they know somebody who they think would be a great fit, make sure you're listening to the different podcasts so you really understand the dynamic, but recommend people that you think would be really great to share their stories forward as well.
Right. Which a few of the guests, I didn't know before we were doing these sessions, because from other team members, they came in and said, you really need to sit with so-and-so. And we'll talk about who so-and-so is as we go through these first 25.
Yeah. So
it's a bit of the operation of the podcast, communications, how we do what we do. Now, who are you? Who is Katie to the world?
I wasn't trying to get away from that. So I've been with the firm for almost 4 years, as you had mentioned, as the Chief Revenue Officer. And I think the story that is maybe unique to share is more about my why for joining the firm. I have a lot of interesting little stories that you and I spoke about, but those were like job stories. I think this is career. And it was around the time I was leaning into my 30s, and I had the fortunate opportunity of representing two very different companies. One, a very big publicly traded company. I was on the business development side, very successful, moved into management, and for certain reasons, I decided to make a change. And then the other one was nonprofit, and was with that, very successful, but for certain reasons decided to make a change. And I sat back and had this inflection moment about what would fill my cup in the right ways. How could I even think about what my legacy would look like moving forward? Which, by the way, I think legacy is a culmination of a lot of different. It's the life you live and the wisdom you impart on others. It's the love you give to people. That's legacy and the ripple effect that it creates. We've talked about ripple effect before, and so. Upon this inflection point, there were three things that I realized I needed when I was navigating a true career path. One was great leadership. I wanted to be around leaders who wanted to impart their wisdom to the team, to help elevate them and motivate them so that they could be the best versions of themselves, so that they could serve clients really well, right? So great leadership. Integrity is so important. And it astounds me that there were moments in my life prior where I felt like that integrity piece was really lacking. And you can even infuse that into this world. How often do we hear about bad actors in this industry and how consumers don't know the difference? And people pushing product as opposed to delivering true fiduciary experiences, right? Integrity. And then the third one was purpose. And I think purpose resonates with everyone and should be important to everyone. Why do we wake up every single morning and go into work and leave our families and make this decision to spend this amount of time in this space with other people, right? Other people you hope become family. It's because hopefully you have aligned yourself to the purpose of that organization and the makeup of it. So for Clearwater Capital Partners, you and I know our purpose statement to inspire and empower our clients to live with confidence, joy, and that spirit of abundance. For me, it was that. And then it was also the foundation. So we serve our clients really well, right? But then to be able to go back and serve in our community in meaningful and impactful ways, what a beautiful marriage of purpose. So those were really the three elements that were the priority for me moving forward. And as you had mentioned, in my early 30s, so now everybody's going to kind of timeline how old I am, but I was in that human capital management space for a decade. I did find it there. I found it there until I didn't. And then it was time to really find that leadership, the integrity, and that purpose. And Clearwater, just amazing how it was built, how it was born, the fiduciary mindset, the rallying to serve our clients well. Right. There you go.
So it's humbling, right? As we serve together on the operating committee, right? And the leadership and what that, because I agree with you. And if all of our team members are looking for that, then that has to come back and inspire us to give our best into what we're doing and what we're leading and doing it with integrity. And I do think those two things come together as this character construct, right? And then the purpose of the work that we're doing and how do we do that to the absolute best of our ability and continue to push ourselves, get into the competency component. And so when you frame it that way, and as I was just listening to it, this leadership, integrity, and purpose, how do we bring character and competency to this world? Now, when some people hear chief revenue officer, they hear sales, right? Sales, and we couldn't be anything further from that. So can you talk a little bit more about the business model and what this revenue concept is, back for the listeners?
We have 3 practice areas to our firm. We have our family office that serves the ultra high net worth. That is the space where you're the managing partner, right? We have our private wealth practice, ultra high net worth individuals and families. And then we have the institutional side of the house. So think about serving employers with 401 retirement plans, qualified, non-qualified, 401k, 403b, cash balance plans, profit sharing. We also serve under that umbrella endowments and foundations as well. So to answer your question, my world is all around making sure that the brand of the firm and all the practice areas that live under that brand are moving forward in the right directions, getting in front of the right audience. The client experience is a really big part of my role to drive meaningful moments, opportunities of feeling of belonging with our firm. And we always hope our clients feel that way when they step in, when they call, when they come to an event, attend the car show. There's so many moments that exist. And that's what true client experience is in my mind. It's not just this one event. It's not just the liquidity. It's everything that transpires throughout that entire life with the client.
So as we're entering 2025, the firm was founded in 2006. The fact that you found the firm 4 years ago, right, in order to give your best hours of your day and your life to the work that we do, but to rewind and go back to the very beginning. Why don't we start our going through these 25 episodes with episode number 1, where I sat down with our founding partner and current CEO, John Chapman, and hear a little bit from him regarding why he founded the firm that you're still finding exactly that in. So let's listen to John.
Wonderful.
Wall Street was not interested in advice. In fact, back in the day, and still to some degree even now, regulators look at advice very differently than the way you or I perhaps understand it. They didn't really feel that advice was central to the client-advisor relationship. In fact, the regulators had a word for it. They thought of it as being incidental. Whether it happened or it didn't, the customer was paying for a transaction. I just thought that was very backwards. And Wall Street and their lobbying efforts really did not want the responsibility of a fiduciary standard or anything that looked like that. And they kept pushing back at it. And so I guess the idea that got into my head was maybe I could build the firm that Wall Street was not interested in, that I could build it for the client, around the client. I had in my mind then, and it persists to this day, that there are 2 fundamental elements that I wanted to pursue, and neither of them were negotiable, and that is character and competency. If we could build an organization for the client, around the client, and deliver character and competency, that we could succeed. Because if you think about it, for any length of time, one without the other of those 2 things doesn't really get us very far.
Right.
You know, I've known a lot of people in my career that were really, really smart, but I couldn't necessarily trust them or trust their motivations.
Right.
I had another group of people that maybe were very well intended, but they couldn't do the heavy lifting, the competency things that this industry requires.
Yeah.
So if I could get those 2 things right and build the firm that Wall Street wasn't interested in, perhaps we could change the game. And here we are 17 years later.
Yeah. So that was 2006, the founding of Clearwater Capital. In 2007, when I was running the syndicated loan operation for GE Capital, which is a $40 billion portfolio of debt into private equity transactions, John and my paths crossed. And it's why I engaged him and in the newly founded business for my family. If something happened to me, how's my family going to be cared for? And wanting to find exactly those 2 items, character and competency. Doesn't mean perfection, doesn't mean there's some secret to it, but people that are rolling up their sleeves to give their best and to do it at a very high technical level where there's integrity and that leadership, and the fact that that's persisted and has attracted you. And frankly, I think that, and our hope is, right, and that's what we strive for, is also to not only retain the families we're serving, but also to retain our team and to grow our team.
Absolutely.
With the offers we have pending with individuals right now as we continue to grow into the future and how we're approaching it.
I think that that's just such a special element that we have that focus, that hyper focus on, is that character and competency throughout the entire hiring process. It really has lifted the firm up in amazing ways to look at all the team members that are part of Clearwater and how they bring their talents to the table to take care of our clients.
So you talked about you're dating yourself a little bit, right? And since I'm still a young man, you're still a young woman, then we're going to keep it that way. But as you look forward with that intentionality and you think about the legacy that you're leaving back with the families that we're serving as a team, because it absolutely is a team effort, as cliche as that might be, it's absolutely true. And it's a reason it's a cliche. So as you think about your legacy and how you define that, as you look forward, how do you capture this concept of legacy?
Personally
Yes.
or personally? Okay. I think the whole idea of legacy for me personally, I look at my kids and I reflect back on all the good things that my parents had taught me, but also some of the things that they just didn't know to share forward, right? And I want to be able to find all the ways of trying to get ahead of the things I don't know that I can share forward to put my kids on the best path forward. I think about 401k. So here we are in this space. And that was something that was never, my parents didn't know. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked in the construction industry. So she had a pension and there was no such thing as 401k in that industry. And it was just one of those things that when I got into the professional world, they didn't know to tell me. And unfortunately, it was not passed down to me by the HR people or any direct managers at that time. So I went very unknowing, very successful in that business development world and didn't know anything about 401k. What a miss. What a huge miss for way too long. So thinking about things like that, how can I help my kiddos get ahead and be able to live the best futures that they possibly can? Not spoiling them, but putting them on the right path. I think that's legacy. I think legacy is teaching compassion. There's an episode in here that actually drives that point home. So when we get there, I'll be really excited to bring that back to the table. But it's teaching all the things that were important growing up and all the things that I felt like, and there weren't a lot, but gaps, right? And then allowing a ripple effect. I would say another quick thing, John. I run a group called the Nonprofit Alliance underneath the Schaumburg Business Association umbrella. And it brings in not just over 50 nonprofits, but actually hundreds surround it. And I think about the very proud opportunity that I have to be the leader of that and bring great speakers and conversations to the table for these nonprofits to be able to deliver even more so on their mission and the trickle effect that can happen if one thing is put into place and the impact that goes, rolls downhill, so to speak.
Right.
So
when we talk to client families and what we, want for them in the services we're providing, the dialogues, the conversations that we have, we want the same thing for our families too, right? We're striving for that aspect. And the great news for us, at least, right, is we get to see all these different best practices from various families of what goes so well and being able to turn that around for our own families and say, here's a great idea. And some of the podcast is exactly trying to capture that, right? To capture these lessons learned from these different families and how they're approaching what it is as we're on this journey and navigating life, to impart that on our respective families and then also on the world around us. How do we make the world a better place? And we'll come back to the buckets of family and charity and taxes, but we'll leave that for a later time. Now we have 25. Well, this is the 25th episode, so 24 to review here. And listeners are already going, wait a second, this is going to be a 4-hour episode.
It won't be.
We'll pick up the pace here a little bit, but we're going to go from episode 1 with John Chapman, which I do encourage individuals to go back. If you want a little bit of perspective and insight regarding how our founding, partner and our current chief executive is approaching the way we're doing our business still to this day with as much energy and gusto and passion for having this business model and evolving this business model to serve our clients, listeners need to go back and listen to that.
And he has some great nuggets of wisdom always. And
we're not going to share any more now. We're going
to
go back and listen to it.
But he's coming up. He'll be the next podcast too for listeners. So go back and listen to this one before you
listen
hear the
to
second. For sure.
Before February 1st.
So the next episode with Kenny, Kenny Cox is a dear friend of our firm, a dear friend of yours, a client. What a beautiful personality. And one of the things that you initiate is in this clip, and it's his aha moment in stewarding financial capital. So why don't we jump into that and maybe have a little commentary?
As we talk through those items, what have been some ahas that have come along regarding how you steward the financial capital aspect of the equation?
Yeah, I think the biggest aha has been to give up control. And I think early on, I was focused on how do I create safety and security around myself and my wife. And now it's about how much can we give away before our passing. I believe that society has created this thought that you should give away upon your passing, and that's flawed in my view. So I think the biggest aha for me, which you've been on the journey with me, is to give it away now to help others in your lifetime. And that includes, making some shifts in stock ownership into the donor advised fund and putting together an estate plan that, that creates enough for our kids to do something great for themselves, but not so much that they can go and do nothing. I think Warren Buffett, talked about that with his own children. And so to me, those are some of the big ahas that I've come away with. And then leaving it up to other individuals like yourself and the attorneys to create the right plans, to surround yourself with trusted individuals so that you don't have to learn it all or understand it all is important. And then for me to be able to focus on the things that I do understand or where my skill set is more aligned.
Yeah, there are like 3 episodes just in that little track of what he talked about.
Right. And when he foreshadows, we're going to come back to Trisha's a little bit later, but talking about the plan. And the plan comes from the individuals that he surrounded himself with that helped to guide through all the intricacies, right? Because no one wants to be the expert. And he also highlights collaboration, right? Because there's the estate planning attorneys, right? Or the M&A attorneys, or what we're doing is the CFO back for the family. And in full disclosure, I chair the board for the family's holding company. So being involved in a level of depth, but this is what we talk about when we talk about family office services. You get into board governance, right? Chairing the board for this particular family. You think about philanthropic activities, right? And giving it away over time. A donor advised fund. It might not be the answer for everyone, right? And anything we talk about is never construed as a blanket. Here's a recommendation. This isn't legal and tax advice specific to anyone else, but to tailor and access the tools for what that family in particular is trying to achieve. When we talk about ideal client persona, like what are the families that are meaningful to us, that we give our best to because they inspire us in the work that they're doing and we're coming alongside them. That's huge. And there's a few great examples we'll hit on, but Kenny and his wife, Kim, and their family, are so meaningful to us.
I don't know how to say it any better, John. That the whole episode, I would say for anybody listening that is trying to understand or has that mindset of, I don't want to just have this all until I die. What can I do? I mean, this is a great episode to listen to where he's unpacking that through and even more. There's so many more goodies. Yeah.
That's why that's why we're going to try to keep it condensed, but these little teasers that are out there and these little trailers. So a couple of them, and then before we come back to the next clip, because the third episode, we had Terrence Wallace.
Yes.
And Terrence with his businesses, not only here in the United States, but his time in New Zealand and founding a technology company in New Zealand, his work with youth and is dedicating his life and pouring back into individuals where he came from the streets of Chicago, making an impact still with youth there, did the same down in New Zealand. And really for me, it crystallized whether it's for profit or not for profit. And you mentioned having those in your own career. doing your work with excellence is independent of the tax status of the entity that you're working for, right? Everything that we should do should be brought to bear with excellence, bringing your best, bringing that competence component, striving to learn more so you can turn around then and give more. You can't give what you don't have, right? You can't serve people unless you have taking it in yourselves. And I think Terrence is just a great example of that, of seeking perspective, seeking input, and then bringing it to bear both in the for-profit and not-for-profit world. And I think there was a statistic on Terrence's that you had too.
He had the most viewed video on YouTube, and he had the highest watched clip on Instagram.
Right.
So yeah,
so it resonates.
There's something going on there. Yeah. And I think the other thing that our listeners embraced is his story of resiliency.
Yeah.
Oh man. And we're not going to share what this is, but there are actually two episodes, Terrence's and another one where there is this life-altering thing that happens, and but we're not gonna spoil it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got to listen to the whole episode. Go back and listen to it, and I think you'll be encouraged and inspired by Terrence and who he is as a person and how he and his family live. Because in episode 4 we moved into Joe Pringle, and Joe as a 5th generation, family from business, the story that he had of great wealth created. And how that works its way through multiple generations, and what that meant to him personally, and how he continues to give back and inspire others and work with others, and also live it out very, very personally with his wife Tammy and their adult children and their grandchildren. And I think he even said, he's like, the family businesses now, the philanthropic endeavors that we're engaged with, right? Yeah. We see that even though everyone's working professionally in different ways, they see that family business shift. And again, the family business, it doesn't matter if it's a for-profit or not-for-profit. They're bringing excellence to what they're doing to make an impact on the world. And I've told a lot of people, when I grow up, I want to be like, I want to be like Joe. I want to be like Joe.
Well, and I think it's worth even teasing a little bit the listeners today. As a 5th generation entrepreneur, it started with buggy whips. I mean, how cool is that? But then think about the dynamic and the imperative nature of innovation that would have to exist with somebody who produces buggy whips.
Right.
And to have this business thriving today, we don't have buggies today, right?
Well, so innovation. So you just, so pulling me back into this one, because it actually, the story starts back in the 1600s, right? And the family coming over and spending a couple hundred years in the Northeast before making their way to Midwest and Chicago. And then rawhide and Chicago stockyards and buggy whips. And then as the story goes, right, Ford inventing the car and needing gaskets. Well, there wasn't a such thing as rubber. So how do they use rawhide? So I'm going to stop there, right? So go back and people have got to listen to it. No, I think it's fantastic because I agree. It's just a great, it is a great story of innovation over time and what that means. And also, by doing things well and innovating and creating and solving problems for others, well, that's the entrepreneurial journey, right? That is people are making it up every day in some ways to figure out how do you go off and solve problems and then continue to evolve as the world evolves around you. And as we've often said, quoting Brian Westbury at First Trust, right? The world's never moved this fast and it'll never move this slow again. Right? Because the pace of that change, right? It was one thing going from buggy whips to automobiles, but this pace of change in technology makes it a challenge for entrepreneurs and families to navigate this technological evolution, which that was a technological evolution that took place in its own day. So yes, go back and you gotta listen to Joe's story.
Sorry to listeners there, but we'll move on. And this next episode 5, is with another, this is the first couple we had on the episode, which I feel is just so very special. Stacy and John Pizzafaro, they beautiful people, great relationship to our firm, great relationship to you, clients of our firm as well. And I think what I'd like to do is just kick it off by playing the clip.
Let's go.
We started with the kids, with Nicaragua. taking them on trips. John was adamant that we take the whole family down there and let them see that most of the population of the world doesn't live like we live, and the comforts that we have, and to go down and serve and make meals and help kids and just play with them and just see that this is the reality for a lot of people in the world. So that was really important to us, to open up their eyes, their minds to, and have a heart to help. And so I think that was really important to us. And then I think now that we talk about charities and who do they want to support, and opening up the dialogue to them, like, what is God speaking to you in your heart? What, compassion do you have for certain charity, or,
Yeah,
you want to jump in?
We started a foundation, and so we put the kids on the foundation board. And as you know, I had a vision for it that didn't come completely to fruition. My vision was, hey, we're going to put the kids on the board, and they're going to gather around, and they're going to dive in, and they're going to pick different charities to support, and that's what I thought would happen, because I know their hearts. But what I didn't realize is that they're young 20-somethings, and they actually have a life that they have to deal with. They got jobs, they got careers.
The fun part of that one, since we recorded it, is the fact that now Sarah, their oldest daughter, is now the executive director of the foundation. And so one of the items we talked about in business, right, in this evolution and how organizations evolve and to do it over years and decades or even centuries, as we share in the Joe Pringle family story, here you don't come in and solve it. When families think about family governance, it's not you flip the switch and everyone embraced John's vision as he was sharing it, and yet the routines, the communication within the family, the dialogue, the not forcing it upon the next generation, because that tends to have rebellion associated with it when anything's forced. But the casting of the vision of what they want as a family, the on the ground and what they did serving in Nicaragua, the inspiration even within the family to say they want to do more and more along those lines. And now for Sarah stepping in with where she's at as the executive director, the intentionality behind family governance within families of significant means is the same intentionality that is brought to the business. And a lot of individuals focus on business governance, how you run the business, how you grow that asset. But the family, the human capital, the intellectual capital needs the same intentionality. And I do think John and Stacy are such a fantastic example, again, that encourage me, teach me, inspire me in our service to them regarding how they're processing and thinking through these things. So just love them to death too. And we just keep going through this. These are just such great families that we have the opportunity to serve.
Well, and how often, John, do clients say, I don't want to ruin my kids with money,
right,
but they want to give them experiences so they know that there's so much more outside maybe the world that they've been living in.
Right.
This is such a great example of bringing kids to the place most would never go,
right,
to understand what lives there and to have these experiences, to, as Stacy had said, have the heart for it and understand it in real and raw ways so that they can navigate their own journey about giving, philanthropy, the foundation.
right.
So it all ties together really nice.
Well, and they share the same thought that you had on legacy, right? Because I think their response was, our kids are our legacy, right?
Yeah.
Our future grandchildren, right, are our legacy. And the way that we build into them, not the pile of money and the estate planning documents that come into play, and the charitable piece, starting at home in terms of how do you develop the individuals so that they can be great contributors to society in their own right, and in turn then make the world a better place. And they're just such a great example as a family and how they're doing that and doing that well, and it continues to evolve. these families aren't, they're not worried about the markets on a day-to-day basis, right? Or a week-to-week basis or month-to-month basis. They're playing the long game, thinking about years, decades, and generations regarding the investments that are being made. And when I say investments, I'm not just talking financial capital. I'm also talking about human capital, and that plays itself back in the family. So yeah, again, we're going to say this after every episode
listen
needs
to
to
that
go back
one.
and listen to. Because then after, John Stacy, we had a conversation with Jim Candelas and talking about private equity and what that means and how you go through. And they brought in growth capital from private equity, and then ultimately with an exit associated with a big strategic buyer globally. And I think the recording was in between the private equity growth capital infusion and then the exit, or as people like to say, the second bite of the apple, right? With the strategic acquisition that was in there. But navigating that and being part of that when you're an entrepreneur and saying you want to continue to grow this, a lot of people, Ken even said it in his, right? Giving up control. It's not sometimes not giving up control, but it is bringing in other partners and capital in this case to grow and make a bigger impact. If you believe in what it is that you're doing, why would you not want that to grow? So I think Jim did a great job walking through that. And again, Jessica, their family, again, I'll sound repetitive in terms of going through the different
So
families.
for those thinking about if private equity is a path that they would want to go down, here's a great episode for that.
Right, right. And that weaves its way through many of these stories too in the background, which then brings us to Tyler Beachler. And Tyler, as our Deputy Chief Investment Strategist, CFA leads the team and that are, having that CFA designations, but also, mindset approach to what we do in portfolio management, both public markets, private markets, how we think about totality of financial asset allocation, when we think about where it fits into the estate strategy and how we approach that, how that comes alongside private direct investment, right? A lot of entrepreneurs, they're private companies and how that plays itself out. And then what happens after an event. Well, before I go through too much of it, why don't we actually listen to it in Tyler's words versus mine?
In terms of the investment strategy, and you made a really good point of, doing this estate strategy during that growth phase as the business, oftentimes that business ends up being, the highest growing, asset that you might have. So being able to do estate strategy planning with that asset before it's reached its full mature phase opens up then the opportunities then down the road once you're in that mature looking to exit for what the investment strategy is going to be. And ultimately, a lot of it does depend on, what's the legacy that these entrepreneurs are wanting to leave behind and what role financial capital plays in that. Because like you said...
Well, then we're in a great place for that conversation, right?
Yeah, we are. Because then you get into, okay, well, what parts of the estate then and what assets then are able to be grown, for the future, for generations down the road. Okay, well, it makes a lot of sense then from a placement perspective to have some of your, yes, riskier, but higher potential earning type assets in those structures that are outside the estate. Why? Because at that point, you're using your taxable estate assets to be living off of. So that's where liquidity income starts becoming more and more important as you're, maybe you're doing new ventures or maybe you're, ready to be, retired at that point or off doing, philanthropic activities, whatever that looks like. Well, okay, you use your in-estate assets then to be leveraging some of that, taking much less risk there versus assets that are designed to be given, years, decades down the road to future generations will have very different investment strategies. And so that's why the placement, working with the strategy, the work that I've seen you do, with clients, preparing them for this exact point to be having these conversations with clients becomes all that more powerful if done sooner rather than at exit time. Because at exit time, there's only so much you can do at that point in time. It's not that you can't do anything, but it's just a little bit more limited in terms of the power of that planning.
I mean, that clip is so perfect. I hope any entrepreneur out there listening really captures this big critical point in my eyes. And that is, if you're thinking that at some point you're going to have some type of exit plan, a liquidity event, plan well in advance, not when you're just about ramping into that phase and you see, oh, I know I'm going to have a windfall, whatever that means to that individual. Plan in advance, because now there are a lot of things that can exist behind tax strategy and philanthropic giving, whatever the aspirations are that that individual has, they can achieve it better if they plan for it.
Yeah. That aspect, when I was on the Geeks of the Valley podcast recently, and they asked, and I was the guest, right? So the tables were turned on me a little bit, but as the guest, they're like, where are the shortcomings? Where are the potential pitfalls? And it's like not planning, right? Not planning, because when you get into that, right back to the Jim Candelas podcast, when you get into that process of going through a transaction of whatever, whether it's bringing in growth capital, whether it's exiting completely, it becomes very consuming, right? Yeah. Front row seats, we know it becomes very consuming for people. But having a plan in advance of then going through that event so that the outcome of that event is as tax efficient as possible for what that means for your family and for charity versus tax, that's all the parts that we're planning for. It's to turn around and use this financial capital to have that impact in the world for your family and for charity, and minimize not just estate tax, but income tax, capital gains tax, right? There's ways to structure around that. You still need to pay tax when it's due, but if you have options to do it, you need to move that process way up. So I agree, Katie. It's entrepreneurs that are out there saying there's an exit potentially someday. Then you got to engage in the dialogue and start building before you're right into the fire of what that looks like.
You got it.
So everyone's got to go back and listen to Tyler.
Absolutely. And actually, John, that's a really good transition to Heather, episode 8. So you talk about, it's for this instance, we were talking about exit planning, right? And maybe some philanthropic impact that can exist after that. Well, Heather's whole world is all about creating philanthropic impact. And she does that. So she is the founder of Live Give. She is on our board. She's fabulous. She even helped our firm really map out what our foundation, our pillars all would look like so that we could be more intentional with our giving, more strategic alignment to our firm and our purpose so that we could give in bigger and better ways. So she serves on the corporate side and helps companies realize what that strategy can look like for them, maybe even corporate social responsibility elements in there. And then she also comes in on the personal side, supporting families that are really trying to unpack this for themselves. So really just a fantastic person. I think the thing that I really liked out of her story is what makes good giving. It is the whole story, right? And how to realize what makes good giving for those individuals and then put that in motion in the right ways.
Yeah, so. I think I'm going to have to pre-apologize to all the other guests, because I do think we could spend an entire episode, and we have spent an entire episode on each of these individuals, because there is so much richness, and Heather absolutely is one of those individuals. And as we go to the next episode, which was Tim and Laura Binning, is another couple involved. They were a little bit reluctant and have this beautiful story of working together. Now, working together in their businesses that they had created was just meaningful. I mean, I saw this image of, Tim growing up at 7 years old, being at the drill press, with working in his own dad's business. But the two of them and how they work together and come together as a couple and what this means. And then the interesting aspect, again, of these stories was the follow-up and how meaningful it was to their extended family to actually even listen to their episode, right? And capturing these stories, which to me is just a reminder for all of us to slow down, right? I know we just came out of the holidays. It's a new year, right? We're already running fast because it's January 1st and, Happy New Year. And here we go into another year. But to slow down, engage in the relationships, engage in the people around you. Because if you want to have an impact on people, you can't just be running over them or running by them. You have to slow down and take that in. And that was one of my takeaways too from Tim and Laura's story. Which then brings us to the next episode. And now we're into episode 10. Yeah, speaking of story. Well, okay. So So I'm going to let you introduce this one because this one was the most, I didn't know Trisha before we came into recording this. So in our prep work and going through it, and because I didn't know more of her story or have more of this context myself personally, she was introduced to us by Valerie Hogan, one of our wealth advisors in episode 24 herself. But Val introduced saying, no, you really got to sit down and listen to Trish. And I learned so much. So I'm going to stop there. Katie, go ahead.
So Trisha is the CEO of Redmark, and it is a marketing company, but it's so much more than that. They really get into the minutia of storytelling in impactful ways. And in fact, I have so much I want to say about it, but I think the episode you guys had together was so impressive. There were so many great little elements that came out of it that we actually chose two.
We chose two,
clips.
because we couldn't.
So let's watch the first clip and then we'll talk.
At Redmark, we use a 5-point system that builds on a story, uses story theory to build a narrative arc. So the 5 points are: point 1, every story would have a character, a main character, your hero, if you will.
Okay.
Point 2, that hero finds a challenge, a problem, a deep issue that they need to solve. Point 3, they come across a guide. This guide could be an individual, a concept, something that is going to help them solve this problem. Step 4 is a plan. The guide introduces them to a plan or reveals some steps in the road to solve this issue. And step 5 is the resolution. Something happens at the end, a success or a failure in their conquest of achieving or rectifying this challenge.
Right.
It seems so simple,
right.
but really impactful to, like, the first time I heard her say this, I was sitting in the back and I thought, oh my gosh, this is our story with our clients. They're the heroes.
Right.
They're coming to us. They have this thing happening, because there are so many things that happen with our clients throughout their journey with us. We're the guide that comes alongside them. We talk about you coming alongside families as the CFO, right? They're the CEO to their family, and we're the guides helping them maneuver according to what their aspirations are, what their needs are. And then we help them navigate to that resolution that makes the most amount of sense. But it doesn't end there. Like, that's not the end of the story. Well, that's just those moments. And
in making them the hero, right? I think that's what's important. And the second clip, Trisha's going to unpack that a little bit more. But it is all of a sudden these, many entrepreneurs, heads down, growing their business, and then they look up and then they have a problem because they have this significant value of this asset on their balance sheet. And that becomes her point number 2. That becomes a challenge. Now, how do I deal with this, right? Well, how do I think about this? Because most people are growing that for their family or for charity is important to them and not for taxes. And I've said it often in this podcast, there's only 3 buckets it goes to: your family, charity, and taxes, income and estate. So and that is the definition of an involuntary philanthropist. Involuntary philanthropist is giving the money to the government and letting them decide the best allocation for human good. A voluntary philanthropist steps in and says, no, I can redirect assets myself. I can actually get tax breaks to do that. And I can do it in a very tax efficient way. So to focus on those first 2 buckets, your family and the charity, and reduce taxes, that gets wrapped around this challenge. But then families look up and say, I need a guide. Yeah. Who's a guide? What's the business, right? What's the business model that best aligns for me to work around the issues and the conflicts within the industry, which goes back to John Chapman's talking about, this is why I founded this firm to serve families and be that guide alongside them, to have plans, estate plans, financial plans, investment plans, philanthropic plans. Those are the plans so that there's a resolution and there's an accomplishment. I think this so beautifully captures and puts words to what we're striving for and what we do. So it really was these ahas that we were going through it. But there's a second clip
There is. Let's listen to this hero-centric mindset.
All right.
Many times organizations, as they're telling their story, will put themselves as the hero. this is not the right place for an organization
Okay.
to be in their story.
And
The
when you say that,
organization-
what do you mean by the organization puts themselves in as the hero?
an initial meeting might be about their founding or what they really care about or what they're trying to do. And they tell you all about themselves as their first introduction to you.
We're your hero. You're lucky you found us.
Here we are. Like the best example is Steve Jobs when he was at Apple and released the Lisa computer. And to do this, which was the best home computer at the time. And to release this, he put out an 8-page spread in the Wall Street Journal that usually I have a visual, but it's full of text about why this is the best computer, why everyone should love this computer, the RAM, the bunch of acronyms that I don't know. And Lisa flopped. Not solely based on this, but Steve Jobs left Apple, worked at Pixar. And Pixar is a master storyteller.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they use a narrative story arc or story theory, but I'd assume that they are seeped in its relevancy. And when Steve Jobs came back to Apple after that, his advertising
Completely changed.
It's much more visual. They had the tagline of "Think Different," and their next campaign showed Thomas Edison or icons, just singular icons, and said "Think Different." And it was much more conceptual and spoke to an audience. And what that does, the first one, where it was an 8-page ad about why the lease is awesome,
Right.
was him being the hero. The next campaign, when he came back, was him saying his audience is the hero, challenging them to think differently, and putting Apple as that third spot, the guide.
I just love it. It's so good. So listeners have to go back and take a listen to that, because I think there's so much that can be gleaned from a business viewpoint, from how you're thinking about your organization, from how you engage, your employees, the team members, how you engage family, right? In terms of empowering people, versus dictating to them, right? And that's what it's all about, right? How do we guide one another on this journey called life, as we're all trying to figure out this legacy piece? There's just so much that's there that helps to frame the thought process.
Power of storytelling.
I'm going to hit on a few of these, but it's just like, episode 11 was John Reinhardt. Humbled to be included in books, John's book, Gospel Patrons, him founding the organization, and what they've accomplished and done. And it gets back again to this. It doesn't matter for-profit, not-for-profit in terms of the difference in the world. And what's also been interesting in a lot of the different conversations we've had is how deep, right? You talk about authenticity, you talk about transparency, vulnerability, and how much people's belief systems have guided, right, what it is that they want to achieve in life. Right. And how they reflect back on that. They're not just aimlessly wandering the earth trying to make sense out of it, but how deeply rooted that shapes their thought process. And I think John Reinhardt captured some of that. Dave Meyer in his third generation in a risk management business, insurance solutions. His grandfather founded the business, his father involved, Dave involved. And we look at these sort of things as both Dave is a third generation in the family and his business, but then also Dave stepping back in terms of providing services back to families. When we talk about Family Wealth Alliance, we talk about the 10 service standards, this family office space and family office services. Well, one of those items that families have to address is how do you approach this concept of risk, right? And risk management, not only from financial markets, but also what about the boat? What about the aircraft? What about the house? What about the cars? What about the business, et cetera? And you got to have the right insurance solutions that come into place. And Dave absolutely hit on that. In the same way, we talk about other services which get into financial planning and wealth transfer strategies. Again, some of these are the how-tos a little bit. So some of the episodes we had were really the deep family stories. Some of these then get into a little bit of the how-to, like Tyler's component on investment portfolio management. This is where Jeff DeHaan, one of our partners, and Kevin Nolte, our manager of advanced planning, we're really going through the detail that it takes to put together a good financial plan. Back to Trish's right? There's a hero, our clients, there's a problem, they need a guide, and then they need a plan. How do you think about how the legal and tax and financial structures come together in the planning?
Yeah.
And individuals like Jeff and Kevin, and we have a new team member that just joined us coming over from Deloitte, and how we assemble these items for people to make sense out of their plans so that they can have that resolution and be the hero that they want to be. Again, another bit of a how-to approach to it.
Yeah.
Garrett Swigert, right? Talk about just raw and out there in the stories and shrinking the business. And I think he had a quote in there, right? He's like, I was creating a business that I didn't even like, right? And he's like, so I've got to redo this.
It wasn't aligning to purpose.
It wasn't aligning to purpose.
Yeah, it was growing.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's realizing success, but not in the way that he wanted to. And so in his own self, right, you go back to that word that you used earlier, this integrity. He had like this internal conflict that was going on, going, what? And the only person that could change it was him. And he sure enough did, and where he's even at today from when we recorded versus the history that's there. But you want a straight shooter about life, you want a straight shooter about business, right? There's no one better than Garrett to be talking about the ups and the downs and the challenges of what it means to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And
tough decisions that you have to make. And he talks a lot about culture and is really proud of building a great culture, but sometimes there are tough decisions. Yeah.
Right. Which then, talk about tough. Well, you shared a little bit about this, but the next episode. So now we're up to episode 15 in Jeff Miller. So
the title of this one, John, was the stewardship of a saved life. So you can kind of gather some thoughts around that. So Jeff Miller is the owner of Divine Signs. I've known him for over 12 years. A very kind person, a very giving heart. And one of the things that he had said about how he looks at legacy that was a really big takeaway for me was that it was more about leading a followable life that was rooted in faith and empowerment. And that really stuck with me when you think about somebody who has had that very serious life event that happened to him. So like Terrence in episode 3, Jeff Miller also had this big thing happen in his life. And it's interesting to hear how he reacted to it. And I don't want to say anything more because it will make your jaw drop. I've
had people that listened to it and came back and they're like, oh my gosh, did not see that coming.
No. And the response to it. And the response.
How does that happen?
What a beautiful human. And talking about legacy and his kids and his wife and just how he navigates that, especially after the thing that happened.
Yeah. So. Oh, absolutely. So so go back and listen to it. And we're going to stop there. Otherwise, we're going to spoil it for everyone. And then episode 16. So James Chapman, one of our senior wealth advisors, and Dr. Samir Nasiruddin sat down talking about passion assets, which was a great conversation, a little bit of a precursor to the car show.
Yeah.
And so we'll come back to the car show and the foundation after a couple other episodes here, because that was a special episode. So this was a bit of a setup because everyone should have passion assets, right? In terms of what is it you enjoy with the wealth you've created, right? It is important to give back to society. It is important in terms of the charitable components. And I also believe it's important to enjoy it. Yes. Not just stockpile it for the future. As one friend said, every trip I don't take, my kids are taking. So I'm going to go and use some of this to do that. So having passion areas and whatever that means, that's meaningful. Samir and James walking through that was terrific. And then we set up for Lizzie. So why don't you go ahead and introduce Lizzie's episode?
Well, speaking of passion, Lizzie just has that in spades. So Lizzie is the founder and owner of 1349 Tequila. She is such a vibrant personality, somebody who took the initiative, really guided by a lot of the way that the family has done business before, but then taking her own approach to create 1349 Tequila. They had always been in the agave business, right? But she wanted to create the spirit and to navigate what it means to have that craft tequila. So really amazing. I think and we do have a clip, but before we get to the clip, one of the things that I like about Lizzie is this boldness that she wants to make sure that she is not limited to definitions, right?
Yeah.
That she has the opportunity to be viewed as a successful entrepreneur, not just a successful woman entrepreneur,
Right.
not just a successful Latina entrepreneur, but a successful entrepreneur. And she, the clarity and the gusto that she states that is actually really empowering to listen to, and her entire story and journey follows suit.
Yeah.
So she actually shares some advice to entrepreneurs. Let's take a listen.
Okay.
The truth is that there is a solution to everything. You just have to know how to apply yourself, where to apply your energy, what you're seeking, really sit down and figure out the pros and cons and fill yourself and surround yourself with people that sound different than you, people that don't, look the same, don't sound the same, because those are going to be the greatest assets really that you're going to learn from.
And I love that, right? The greatest assets are seeking out the differences.
Yeah.
Right. So if you combine her desiring to not have any labels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like in the world, a lot of times people want to all pick their corners, pick your sides, pick your labels, pick your whatever in terms of defining who you are.
Yeah.
She's like, no, I want to be defined as this great entrepreneur in the business that she's serving, great products to great people and really engaging in that, and then seeking out the different perspectives to learn from.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes confidence, that takes like stature, that takes humility, right? To seek that out and the right answer. And it really is inspiring and again, encouraging that it's like, don't define yourself. Don't let others define who you are.
Absolutely.
Seek out what you want to go accomplish and do that. And I think she's a fantastic example of doing exactly that. So people got to keep listening to hers and also go and, if you drink tequila, 1349.
1349.
And so the next episode then, episode 18 now that we're into, was with Tom Livergood, the founder and now stepped down. Somebody else is running Family Wealth Alliance. But he founded Family Wealth Alliance over 20 years ago, had an exit himself in terms of Schwab, had acquired Family Wealth Alliance. But if you can help listeners, because we talk about Family Wealth Alliance a lot, Katie, and your point on behalf of our firm with Family Wealth Alliance. So before we even share Tom's piece, can you talk a little bit about what is this relationship of Clearwater Capital with Family Wealth Alliance and who's part of it and what do we get from it? And why should our clients care that we're part of this group?
So let's start with what Family Wealth Alliance is, just to make sure that we have some clarity there. So Family Wealth Alliance is a collaborative network of peer-led individuals that serve ultra high net worth families. So family offices like what we are, multifamily office, and organizations that serve that ultra high net worth community. So that is what the Family Wealth Alliance makeup is. And they are an organization that delivers resources through collaboration, through this peer-led engagement. There are partners of all different types that live in the space. So it's not all that wealth management world. It's not that investment management world. It's not just family office. It's also the different partner relationships. So you think estate planning attorneys or private jets, or you could just go through. Yes, the Forte network. Exactly.
When a family, we had a family recently that was just talking about PR and their persona in the world and wanting a firm to step in and clean all that up and get, whatever's on social media, whatever gets leaked out, whatever makes its way, which just makes its way. So we turn around to Family Wealth Alliance and ask them for who are the resources. They get us 2 technology companies that's what they do to manage the PR. So when you talk about, it's not just about the investment wealth management piece, it is about the totality, right? The human capital components for individuals. So tapping into that network. I think Family Wealth Alliance is approaching a representation of, going on $1 trillion of assets under management, but advising on multiples of that when it comes to total wealth. That's deployed. So we learn a lot. We give a lot. Your involvement on one of the roundtables regarding client experience. I'm now on the advisory board for Family Wealth Alliance, so humbled by that.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Because there's just so many fantastic organizations and very large firms that are part of this. And so them seeking out our voice in some of these areas is meaningful. It's humbling. And yet again, we get to give, and then we get by learning from others.
From others. Yeah, exactly.
And so you just came off the Fall Forum. You're co-chairing their Spring Summit.
Yes.
Going in San Diego coming up.
Yeah.
So why does this matter to our clients? We shared a little bit, but why does it matter to our clients, or what should our clients be thinking about us for us to tap into Family Wealth Alliance?
I think where it really, you mentioned the Forte network. There is, I could take this like it could be its own episode, and actually it was. But with the Forte network, that's such a great place for us to go when it's not something that we necessarily do. For example, and we mentioned this, right? The security online, right?
Yeah.
Or
physical security.
The physical security side of it, or you're traveling overseas and you decided to buy a very high-end expensive painting. How do I get that painting from here to there safely and without damage? And what are the things that need to be packaged in that, insurances? And so there is a network called the Forte Network that allows us to tap into really unique resources to serve the intricate needs of our clients.
Because we're building this firm for the families that we serve and those like them. And as their complexity evolves, we need to be evolving with that. We need to stay that step or two ahead of them in terms of these resources and bringing it into them, given how things tend towards complexity. They don't tend towards simplicity. So we always need to simplify as much as possible, but never simpler than gets to the plan that needs to be executed. And I think that's where Tom talks a little bit about in the clip that we have, which is with respect to what makes this Family Wealth Alliance serve multifamily offices that serve their underlying families. What is that ideal client persona, so to speak, and the way that they think about it? So why don't we listen to Tom?
Let's listen.
Help listeners that may not be familiar with some of the terminology. You mentioned single family office, multifamily office, wealth management, financial advisors. Do a real quick glossary for individuals. What are we actually talking about when it comes to those subjects?
Yeah, it's really about net worth and complexity, and how people fall on that two-dimensional graph is the best way I can describe it. And so if you've got $1 million or $2 million and you're a retired Sears exec from way back when in the Chicago area, you probably need a financial plan and an estate plan and some reporting of how your assets are invested, right? And you do a retirement plan and you figure out how much to take out of your IRA, and that's about it. But if you've got $200 million, that's a lot of money. But the issues are different. In fact, it's about $30 to $40 million. We find that most generations won't spend all that money, and they'll pass it on to the next generation. And what happens is then you need a more complicated estate plan. You need more investment categories to diversify the portfolio. You end up, as you know, John, creating different tax entities, right? And then the reporting on all those tax entities and investments becomes more complex. And so complexity with net worth goes up exponentially as you go out that curve.
Right. And those are families that we're serving in terms of that complexity, and then tapping into a peer network that represents hundreds of billions of dollars, right, trillions of dollars of wealth and total. To learn from that, to bring that back and say, now, how does this apply to your particular case, right? That guide role of how this applies to the actual individual. So Family Wealth Alliance has been a great organization. Continue to build on a relationship with them. to tap into that, to bring that back to other families.
Yep.
Episode 19 now is a bit unique because this was a live recording from our car show. So a whole lot was going on during this. But can you spend just a moment talking about Clearwater Capital Foundation, why we do the car show, what that's about, and give a little bit of context for people on this one?
Yeah, so the Clearwater Capital Foundation, John, is really all about the ways that we can give back into the community to people that we would never serve necessarily on the Clearwater Capital Partners side of the house. We wanted to do more, to give more, but to do it with intention. The conversation about Heather Larson, right? And defining out those pillars of serving people in need, financial empowerment, veterans, and really navigating through those dynamics, again, with intention. So that's our foundation. We put on once a year the Charity Supercar Show. It is such a great event. This last year was our 4th annual. And we had over 300 cars, supercars, some muscle, some classic. We had a helicopter come in. We rolled out the red carpet, literally, so that these amazing vehicles could come on up and get their picture and just have this really grand experience. Over 1,200 spectators. We raised $80,000 that went to 3 charitable beneficiaries. But here's the makeup and we're really proud of the 80,000 and being able to do something like that. Our foundation underwrites the whole event so that every dollar raised can go to these charities, right? These nonprofits. But in my mind, here's the magic. This is a place where people come with the purpose of giving. There's this design that everybody wants to come and be a part of it in some way. Our clients, all of our different relationships, it spans across the nation. Even if they can't attend in person, they can attend through donating or participate through donating. They can participate in the live auction that we've had with fabulous trips. But this idea of belonging is so powerful and so strong. I've used it before, this terminology, rallying together for a purpose of giving back into these 3 charities. We have partners and clients who are sponsors, who are car owners that come onto the red carpet and want to show off, who are part of this car community. And it's just such a beautiful dynamic. So all the listeners know our next one, it's going to be huge because it's our 5th, right? It's a milestone. And it's happening June 14th. It's the 2nd Saturday of June 14th. So it's going to be a wonderful
2025,
event.
June
2025.
14th. And so if you're out of state, because or actually we've got some listeners around the world.
Yeah.
If they want to contribute to these end charities, they can contribute. There's ways of funding in that way. If we do have trips like we've had in the past with Italy and the Maldives that people have actually taken up from not being right here, but being, again, across the United States and participating. So there are other ways to participate. And I think it's really important that belonging to something bigger, we're all part of something bigger around us. And in this way, in giving back to the 3 organizations, which if individuals go to this particular episode, they can learn more about the 3 beneficial recipients: a Bridge Youth and Family Services, a Giving Heart, and Fellowship Housing. Those have been the 3 that we, out of this particular event, that we've been making grants towards and raising funds and continuing to build the relationship because of the difference that they make back in the communities too. So it's fantastic. Thank you for your work on behalf of the foundation, on behalf of the community as we continue to build that. From the car show then, we moved into, that was episode 19. So on the home stretch here, episode 20, 21, and 22 was a little mini series focused on chief executive officers that were non-majority family members, meaning they didn't have majority, they didn't have control, yet they were in the CEO chair. So from Terry Graber, Power Construction, nearly 100-year-old company, and he was the 5th CEO. And just great perspective, again, across generations and how you even work with board members from the family that you're a non-family member of, and yet they still have controlling interest, how that dynamic plays out. David Saporta talking about taking a significant company on a liquidity event and working with, and again, I don't want to spoil any of the dynamics, right? But again, the world threw some curveballs into this scenario. He was the chief financial officer, moving into the chief executive officer. What happened, what transpired within the founding family, the majority owners, and then how to come alongside them. And then Jay Haas, right, the third part, and him being that chief executive officer back with who individuals met earlier, right? John and Stacy Pizzafaro is the majority owning family, but they have, between John and Jay in particular, there's a secret sauce that they have going on that if anyone wants to know how do families, how do individuals work and operate in this space, there's a lot to be learned from these two. So let's take a listen to Jay's, because Jay's was what, the most listened to?
Yep. Most impressions, Facebook, Instagram was really high too with regards to the clips.
Yeah. And the feedback on Jay is fantastic and well respected. So let's take a listen to Jay.
So I think the advice that I would give to a family that's considering bringing a non-family member in to play a significant role in the business is just first decide that you like what your rails and what your level of comfort is in terms of your ability or interest to be transparent. And if for some reason the family is erring on the side of thinking there has to be a little bit more cloak, then I think you just have to plan for that, and that has to be there has to be a thought process that goes into that. Versus if the family feels comfortable and there's enough of a trust factor, that's built with the person that they're going to bring into the business, where they do feel more comfortable with a higher level of transparency, I think that goes a long way. It's certainly not like expected per se, but I think it does. It's an olive branch to a degree that it ends up answering a lot of questions, and I think it builds a foundation.
So when you think about some of the subjects, right, bringing in private equity and bringing in growth capital, who you partner up with in life and moving businesses, moving your endeavor forward, there's nothing more important than the human capital, right? The financial capital is an output of the human capital that you bring together, the intellectual horsepower, how they work together. And again, between Jay and John, just fantastic examples of leading towards growing companies, starting companies, and doing that together and doing life together with their other business partner too, Brian Olson. It's just a really, really neat combination. So I do encourage people to go back and take a listen to that one. And that was episode 22. So then why don't you hit on episodes 23 and 24 and take us home?
So the next two episodes were actually our most recent, right? So Melissa Whitaker, she is, talk about another woman who is such a force. She owns her own consulting company. She talks about her journey. If you're looking to really understand how perseverance plays a role in success, this is the episode to listen to. One of her things that she had said about legacy was about living with bold faith. And you can, if you listen to her episode, you will hear that resonating throughout her entire story, her entire journey, not giving up, having successes early on, and then, a moment later it stops. And I think that that's really interesting, because sometimes entrepreneurs have the hockey stick moment and it's like all up, right? And she has that moment, and then something happens, right? And then she comes back to it. And how did she overcome those obstacles? So a really great episode to listen to.
Look at it, and even as you're sharing that, or I'm reflecting back on Trisha again, right?
Yes.
The fact that people's lives are stories, and how often do we slow down and try to understand somebody else's story? And when we do, and we have in these conversations, these stories come out that in some ways play out like little mini movies, right? We've hit on it several times in terms of, and then this thing happened, or this life event, or something, because it's not all up and to the right, because life just doesn't happen that way.
It doesn't.
And so going from Melissa then into Valerie.
Yeah. So Valerie Hogan, she is here's what's amazing about Valerie. There's so many things. She is a wealth advisor at our firm. She works in our family office space, so right next to you, which is a fabulous position for her because her character and competency she is exactly the type of person that our firm always looks for. She has such a heart with all the things that she has done in her past that you have to listen to it. There's so much. I will say she is a licensed attorney. She's a patent attorney. She's a CFP before she ever was a wealth advisor.
Right.
What makes her extra special is that intellectual curiosity that she brings to the table. Her story is all about helping other people. Oh, but wait, I don't know much about this. I'm going to go get certified.
Right.
Wait, I'm not sure about this. She could go to an expert and, I never encourage Googling anything, but sometimes that's a default that people have. And hopefully it's not the default of ChatGPT, by the way, John. But she says, I'm going to go get educated. And she does it in big, grand ways. It is not easy to become a CFP. That's a 2-year process. And she wasn't a wealth advisor at the time. She wanted to serve her type of clientele better. So just a magical personality and that desire to continually dig and to analyze. And it makes her so fitting for her position at our firm.
And I think she's a great example. If there is anyone listening that's looking at a career change, a career shift, maybe you're not thriving in the environment you're at right now, we're continuing to grow. As of this moment, we have 2 offers extended to additional individuals. So as we continue to grow in our own right, because the story or the vision that John had from the beginning, it resonated with me, why I became a client, why I eventually then moved over to help and work with him to continue to grow, as did you, back to that, the leadership, the integrity, the purpose that we all feel individually and then collectively and what we're striving for. Val finding that and how she expressed that in the episode that we recently posted. And we're looking for other great team members that reflect that character and competency as we continue to grow into the future.
What an incredible journey this has been so far with Entrepreneurial Legacies, to be able to bring in some clients, bring in some relationships, partners, and hear how they have done life, and that it hasn't always been easy. They weren't handed a golden ticket, And
that's a beautiful way to end this episode and this session in our time together. Katie, thank you so much again for all of your work on behalf of all of our client families, on behalf of the firm, on behalf of this particular production that we call Clear Conversations. Thank you. You're so appreciated. And if you want to continue the conversation, rewind to the beginning of this episode when Katie walked through all the different ways to connect with us and listen. And at a minimum, send an email to clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Have a blessed day.